Alright, so this video, I kind of wanted to just bring this idea that I've been having for a while now, where I keep kind of talking about Buster not necessarily being as good as the Quick and Arts teams, right? So I kind of wanted to talk about this in one video, and I think the best way to kind of illustrate the point I'm trying to make is to just look at each of these support units for each of the different card types, because it really is the support units that make the actual card type. Like if you don't have a good support, then your card type is basically dead. It's why Arts was like really good at the beginning of the game, because they had Tamamo over here, and like nobody else really had anything like Tamamo. Like I guess Nightingale was somewhat around if you're using Buster servants, but if like you weren't Arts, then your best option was like Waver, and he's kind of like general purpose, I suppose. But what I have pulled up here are Merlin for the Buster support, Skahawk for Quick support, and Castoria as Arts. But I have Tamamo here as well because she's still relevant as an Arts support unit. They are very fortunate enough to have two very high tier supports for their typing. Like Arts has two very solid ones. I don't have Waver or Reigns up here because they're really general purpose. You can use them with whoever you want. It doesn't really matter what card type you are, they'll work well with it. But so let's look at Skadi first, right? Because Skadi's like the first support unit that really like broke the game. She came out and people were like, this is insanity, right? This is like making this the most dominant card type, and NA right now is going through this meta, and they'll be in it for like 2 years. So basically Skadi's effects are all very basic. Like right here we have bam, like really big quick performance, right? This is going to buff their damage as well as their NP gen, right? Because quick cards obviously have NP gen, right? She has that. You know, AoE defense like lower, so that means you can hit a bit harder, which means you get more NP gain, you get more overkill, you know, etc. And then finally, big battery. It's very simple. And then you look at her NP, and her NP's not, it's not bad per se, but it's not the best. Like, yeah, thanks dog. Thanks for the one hit of evasion, and I guess like the 30% crit, because really, if I'm doing anything with Skadi, I just use her NP to overcharge somebody else's, right? I just throw it at the beginning, right? Because it's like, it's just not super insane. Like, oh man, I'm really gonna get this 1000 damage cut and I'm about to be like super balling, right? It's gonna be a great time for me. But Skadi was so broken because she basically took like our like super complex meta of like doing 3 turns. We have to pop like 900 million skills, where Skadi's like, you're starting off, you just pop these skills, you move forward, you don't have NP, you pop the NP skill. You need more damage, defense skill. Like that's all you needed, right? It was super beginner friendly in the way that it's like it's super easy to set up. Now you did need like an NP3 like Lancelot or Edmond Dantes, and having a super scope was preferable, and that's probably the largest barrier to entry because K-scope doesn't go on rate up. It's on every banner, but it's really hard to get a copy of K-scope considering all the different 5-star CEs that are in the pool, and then now you got to pull this one 5 different times, right? It always just seems to be the hardest one to pull. So that's a huge barrier to entry with her, but she's very simple, and she took quick units from being like the 0, right, to being like the best units in the game, because quick cards are kind of like the in-between of these two, right? Like Busters just do damage and they can have the ability to drop stars, just not as much as Quick. Arts cards don't innately gen any stars, but they gen a lot more NP. Quick cards gen a lot of stars, they gen decent NP, but they have the lowest damage modifier, right? So Quick cards were in the position where they were the quote-unquote weakest, but if their attributes, right, their ability to gen stars and gen NP were elevated with, you know, like something like this, it made them very powerful, right? So Skadi was very simple, and she brought forth like these simple attributes of like the quick cards and made it like super top tier. Now, why that's better than someone like Merlin? So if you look at Merlin, like he is built super well. Like he has a strong charisma that gives you 20% attack and everybody gets 20% gauge. That is really strong. It's very powerful. He has a literal just nope skill where he says everybody in the party is fine. Nobody's taking damage. Like that in and of itself would be good. But then he also buffs everybody's crit star generation rate, which remember, these are Buster servants. They can drop stars. They just need something like this to allow them to do that. But That's like the main gimmick of someone like Emiya or Iskandar or Raiko. They're Buster servants that have decent crit star generation, and they can actually drop a lot of stars. So Merlin gives them something like that, which is very slept on. It's very crucial for the kit, though. It works very, very well. And on top of all of that, he's lowering their critical attack chance of the enemy by 20% for 3 turns, because during that time, that's when bosses were starting to get a lot of like high powered like crits, and they were starting to crit very often. And so it would be a situation where you would have type advantage, but the boss would just like crit you down and it wouldn't even matter. So in this point, like, it was very, very good for Merlin to have that. And then he had hero creation, which was insane, because it's like these two, where it's a 3-turn card buff of 50%, right? And then his has the added effect of giving them a bit more tankiness, and then giving them this, because with 2 Merlins, you give them like 100% Buster performance and 200% crit damage, and it's insane, right? It's like double the amount of crit damage you could do with like double Waver, right? It's just absolutely nutty. You could literally just obliterate people in like 1 turn with your face cards alone. And that's what like made Buster so good, because then even you come down to Merlin's NP, it looks very simple, but it's like he's giving you HP, NP, and stars every turn. And remember, you have 2 of these guys, so that means everybody's getting 1 to like maybe 1,500 HP a turn. You know, everybody's getting a flat 5% NP for 5 turns, because Buster servants have a harder time regenning their NP. So this is like, okay, you're going to get 25% NP over the course of 5 turns, but if you have 2 Merlins, that's 50%. And then also he's dropping like, I usually put my Merlins as like the second NP, so they can do like 10 to 15, you know, depending on how I like space them out. But I usually put them last. Like, I'll usually have the attacking NP first Merlin, then second Merlin, so that way I could get like 25 stars a turn, which again ties back into just the whole Buster type meta, right? Because it's supposed to be like, you can use your NP for a turn of damage, then you can just do big crit damage, and then, you know, hopefully you've still got enough stars to play with the turn after, so you can kind of keep up the assault until you get your NP back, right? That's kind of the whole gimmick. The reason, though, that this is like kind of seen as worse than like Skadi as a whole is because people really value the farming, right? Farming is a huge part of FGO. It's a major, major part, because you need to be able to farm. Like, that's how you do like 90% of the stuff in the game. Very little of the game is challenge quests. It's very similar to like Dokkan Battle. If you play Dokkan Battle, the hardest events in the game are like the God of Destruction event and Extreme Super Battle Road, but that's like 5% of all of the content in the game. Everything else is like, you know, normal Super Battle Road, which isn't that hard, the Legendary Goku event, which you can cheese, Dokkan events, story modes, you know, stuff like that, where, you know, if you're good in, like, people, I understand why people do value units that are good in, like, all those other ones, because that's most of the content, right? Like, it's just, like, that's what people value, right? So if you want to look at, like, Merlin and be like, his usefulness in Buster, right? And be like, he's better than Skadi because of that, I totally see your point. Because I think Merlin as a unit and what he brings to the table is much better than Skahawk. But Skahawk allows people to 3-turn farm. She allows nearly any quick servant, provided you have the appropriate NP levels and CEs to use with them, to loop. But you could argue that Merlin is better because you can have like an NP1 Buster servant and Merlin's going to turn them into an insane animal, right? They're going to do good damage regardless. He is like the ultimate Buster support for that reason. So that's like one of the reasons I would argue that he's maybe better than Skadi. But the reason Skadi got put on that pedestal is because she could reliably have people, again, reliably, if you had all the prerequisites, right? 3-turn farm, right? But then we come to arts, right? So we spoke about like Quick and bringing Quick to its best, right? Made it like really broken. But all like Castoria did was give like arts, I don't know, like just everything really. Because look, she's doing basically what Merlin does here, right? Like if we compare them side by side, her skill is just like a more power crept version of this. It's the same attack, but it's 30% NP for the entire party instead of 20, right? They did slap an extra turn like of cooldown on it, but I mean, I don't think anybody really cares. And then she's further able to give one ally an additional 20% NP gauge, which is powerful because that means she's matching Skadi for her 50%. It means she can do it, but she can distribute it. You have more free reign to space it out, because Skadi, the one thing that can be like kind of bad is you could waste giving somebody like a whole 50% when they only needed like 20% gauge. So then she could be like, oh, I'll give you this specific 20% now and the big 30% later. But then further on top of that, everybody in the party gets 30% NP generation for 3 turns, which is, again, ridiculous considering you can have 2 of these and you have 60% NP gain rate, which means you're genning a lot of NP. And then this is like the combination of like Merlin's second and third skill, but it's more tailored to one person, right? Because it's giving them the arts mana burst and it's giving them invincibility, but then it's also being like, hey, threats to humanity, you're gonna get an extra 50% damage, right? So instead of giving crit, she's giving the special damage modifier, which I would argue the crit is better, although it only lasts for 1 turn, whereas this one is 3 turns, right? So trade-offs. Then we have her NP, which I think I think it gives Merlin a run for its money, right? And how good it is. Because I've actually used her NP in farming. I think it has utility everywhere. Because in farming, not only can you put this first, give the attacking person that little bit of extra attack they might need to clear a wave or to overcharge enough NP, but then in challenge quests, you remove all of the party's debuff. So again, very powerful and like as a slot 1 NP. But if you want to put it further back, you get more hits of solemn defense, which is like the ultimate defense that's unpierceable by anything in the game. The only way to get around solemn defense is to straight up remove the buff, right? You have to remove the buff to get around it. So this is why Arts is almost like blowing Buster out of the water, because they basically got Merlin but tailored for Arts, and Arts is probably the best card type in the game because it's got slightly less damage than Buster, but the trade-off is you lose a little bit of damage, but you have the ability to refund your Noble Phantasm, right? That's broken. All right, that's stupid good. It's way too good, and she's giving them really good like offense as well, you know, with the double mana burst and the double charisma, and then her NP being arguably as good, if not better than Merlin's, right? So, and then also we have Tamamo over here. The reason I have Tamamo pulled up, right, is because Tamamo, I believe, the last time I checked, allows you to do more damage than Castoria does, because she gives the 30% NP damage. She has the same, like, 50% arts, like, buff right here. And then, she also allows you to like refresh your skills more often because she's not giving as much NP, like it's 25%, it's not as much, but she's allowing you to basically loop your skills, right? So if you look at it, it's like Castoria is only giving 20% attack and 50% arts, but Tamamo's giving 30% NP damage, which is a rarer buff as it like tends to be, and then she's also giving the same 50% arts. So she allows you, or should allow you, to do more damage at the cost of like not being able to loop as easy. Like you're trading the 50% NP and like the 60% NP gain for slightly more damage, but you're also getting the ability to loop your skills. So this is why I say that Buster is dead though, right? Because while I think Merlin is a better caster and is a better unit than Skadi, right? Like I think Skadi is by far worse than Merlin and Castoria. She's probably just like as a unit more relative to Tamamo. But even then, I think Tamamo's a hell of a lot better than Skahog, right? The problem is, you can use these two right here, Castoria and Skadi. You can use them anywhere. You can use them for farming, you can use them for challenge quests, single target servants, AoE servants, doesn't matter, right? As long as they're like supporting their card type, they're going to be fine. In fact, Castoria is seeping into Merlin's territory and helping servants out like Ibuki Doji, right? And then there's people like Summer Brynhilder, who I look at and I'm like, this looks like a servant that, like a Buster servant that wants to be run with Castoria, right? It's very odd. So you have like these two being like able to buff these two card types and make them good anywhere. And for Buster to be able to like come to their level, to be like on par with the other two, they need a caster that's going to allow them to loop, right? Because We have some Buster servants like the Artorias, right, that refund some of their NP on, using their NP. Like Artoria, I think, gets like 20 to 50% of her NP back whenever she uses it. But the problem is, like, you want the caster to be doing that, because I can't use Artoria everywhere, right? What happens when, like, Artoria encounters, like, I don't know, I have to, like, farm archers, or it's like a neutral wave, like, say they're like casters or something, but she doesn't do enough damage because she doesn't have type advantage, right? You have that problem. And then even then, I believe that, like, Artoria strat works better with Skadi anyway. But you just have, like, that problem where, like, Buster needs somebody that allows people to farm, right? That allows them to loop, and then they can come back on par. But I understand their, like, hesitation in doing so, right? Because Buster does the most damage. So if Buster can also loop, then it's going to be a point where Buster's on top again. Because if you can loop any of the most damage, what's the point in using the other ones, right? So we're going to need to see some innovation with Buster, basically is what I'm saying. Because, again, I think Merlin's built better than Skahog. I think he's built better than she is. But the fact that she's going to be good anywhere, and, like, Merlin with just his 20%, NP, and then, the 5% NP over, like, over turns, it's just not good enough for farming. Whereas these two can split 50% NP to either one. And Tamamo, you can, like, kind of do farming with. You just, like, if you have someone like Ryder Mordred, right, like, on the last event we had on NA, I was using Ryder Mordred and, like, Tamamo and Waver, and she was able to loop it just fine, because Ryder Mordred's actually a spurg when it comes to NP gen. So you can even get away with it with Tamamo. So it really just depends on what they do with the Buster meta. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys think about Buster being dead. Who, like, the best support casters you think are out there. I know there's other people we could mention. We could talk about Hans. We could talk about Nero Bride. We could talk about other people like that. But I thought I'd keep it to, like, kind of the core main casters. I also didn't want to make the video too long, bringing people like Waver and Reigns into it, because Waver and Reigns just might low-key be the best casters in the game, because you can plug them in with anybody. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.